Welcome back to what appears to be Volume 7 of the Future of Education Roundtable discussion, wherein, as the title implies, we discuss the future of education. With me, as always, are Debbie and Jackie, and today we have Tom with us, and I don't know why I'm feeling so casual and so informal with everything today. I'm feeling kind of sassy. And we have Sally, and since Sally is, I'd say, the newest of us, we'll introduce her by her full name, Sally Brown. Today, we're going to be talking and hopefully getting into a meaningful discussion about embracing technology as it intersects with our children, embracing technology as it intersects with education, and perhaps if we're good, even getting into and through some of our resistance and biases when it comes to technology and education. With that, let's jump right in. Actually, Debbie, can you kick us off as I do the manual sharing that I have to usually do, where I'm looking down and not at the camera?
Absolutely, Manny, I got you. So welcome everybody, 7th volume of our show. Today we're going to talk about technology. And Thomas, I'm going to ask you to start us off with your overall perspective of the use of technology in today's classroom.
Okay. There's a time and a place and an age level where I think it's highly appropriate. I also think there's an age level and a grade level that it's not. I personally am opposed to technology K through probably 5, because I think at that time they need to learn the hows and the whys and not what buttons to push. It's the time to nurture the critical thinking and to teach that type of education versus the technology end. They can pick up calculators and computers at any time, but I've seen that once a kid starts using a calculator, they learn how to this button and this button and this button gives you an answer. Mm-hmm. But there's not the understanding of why that happens.
Yeah.
And I would much rather have the kids taught in K through 5 to think for themselves. Long division, diagramming sentences to learn the parts of speech, that type of old school stuff. It's going to keep the kids wired, keep them kind of interested. And then when they start using technology, I think they'll be able to do it and use it more effectively and efficiently. So that's my humble opinion. And one other thing I've seen here in Montgomery County, Maryland, they invested hundreds of thousands, not millions of dollars on smart boards.
What's a smart board, Tom?
Instead of using the old-fashioned projectors and a grease pen and an overhead slide that you project writing on a chalkboard, they're using these smart board things. What a colossal waste of money. Because most teachers aren't using them because the teachers are not getting thoroughly trained to use them properly. So why invest in a lot of technology if you can't invest in the training that needs to go behind the technology? I can give you all the technology in the world. I can give it to Jackie. But if I don't teach Jackie how to use it, she's only going to get a fraction of the value out of it, which means what she'll be teaching her children will be even less. So that if you're going to make a commitment to technology, it's got to be a full investment on teaching and training the people that will be using it, and then those that are dependent on using it to teach their charges.
So I'm hearing two different ideas here, both of which I think are important to investigate. One is a lack of what you would call sufficient training for the integration of technology into the classroom.
Right.
And the other is some sort of an age limit. Maybe that's a way. I don't mean to sort of spike it like that, make it sound negative. That's not my goal. But you're suggesting some sort of like a pre-access to technology period where we educe, instill, teach, and model other things that you deem more foundational.
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay.
Much better way with a lot fewer words.
And I still used a lot of words. So the thing that I think is interesting here is you talk about these smart boards. I'm not sure what they are still, but what I do know is we're not being trained to use them. This is what I now know. Isn't that, in a sense, integrating technology into the educational environment, and then at what age are they bringing these things in? Because what I'm seeing as a possibility is here's a way that technology is playing a part in younger education without it being the stigma. And here's where I think a lot of people of our generations are maybe being unrealistic about how it could look in the future. It doesn't have to be this. That doesn't have to be the way kids engage with technology, right? It can look up any way we can dream up, it can look.
Well, if you're talking about technology, just interject on that.
Yeah.
I naturally think laptop and computers, but the reality is we're using technology right now.
Yeah.
So I think if you really want to talk about technology, you'd have to define the types of technology. If come September in the next school year, we are not back in the classroom, this will be the technology we have to learn and use.
Right.
So I think we need to better define what type of technology are we actually talking about and how it's used. Yeah. And then going back to one of your points, Manny, I can put a smartboard in a classroom, but if I'm not using it right, am I really integrating it, or am I just bringing it in?
Yeah. Agreed. Sally, we're going to throw you in the deep end.
That's cool. I absolutely love technology. I mean, I taught design and technology in the UK, and taught product design, so working in wood, metal, plastics, etc. And saw how initially, I taught well over 20 years, so initially we'd got very little technology, and I literally had to learn it on the job.
Yeah.
You know, I've literally had to go through, I taught, you know, IT skills as well. But it's about getting a balance between using technology in the right way. I mean, I moved so that all the coursework, the examination coursework, was electronic. It was sent on a USB drive. We got rid of paper. So, you know, obviously I had to teach the kids how to develop their work using their IT skills. However, they still had to have their practical skills. We still did drawing, we still, you know, and transferred the drawing onto the computers. And then it was a gradual progression. I mean, the way I particularly taught product design was just get them creative. So sometimes they'd be designing on a computer, but sometimes they'd be making cardboard models.
Sure.
Or they'd be using wood and it's about using it in the right way. I mean, I'm dyslexic, so computers are heaven for me.
Yeah.
Because they help me with my spelling, because, you know, I've had to learn how to spell.
Yeah.
But sometimes I even confuse spell checkers even now. I actually have to, because spelling is important to me, but I sometimes have to Google something to find the right spelling because the spell checker can't understand what I'm doing.
Right. Yeah.
No. So technology for me is about learning how to use it in the right way, you know, and pupils can develop 3-dimensional modeling. But then I would always get them to draw it out and make models as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
To develop that creativity.
This is a very exciting sort of an emblematic example of a way that we can integrate and interact with technology educationally that perhaps we aren't thinking of when we're sort of afraid. And I'm not sure the word afraid is the word I want. We're just resistant to having. You know, I think when an adult, an educator, someone in the education environment says technology and kids in the same sentence, what we conjure up is a nightmarish sort of dystopian image of a kid with like tentacles coming from his laptop into his brain, right? You know what I mean? And so this is a really nice example of a way that I wouldn't have thought, where the advent of technology helped one person tremendously. And it also helps, it helps you and your students interact as well, it sounds like. So how, especially from the unique position of design, how do you see the potential for well, first, let me say this, you guys, whether we like it or not, Generation Alpha, which is going to be the kids of millennials, is going to be the kids of millennials, are going to be completely immersed in technology in ways we can't predict. There's nothing for it. It's happening, right? The horse has left the barn. You know what I mean? And so what we can do now is we can begin to think in terms of how does that relationship show up? We can begin to think in terms of what are the most clever, productive, creative, innovative ways that we can facilitate this. It's really going to be emerging because these kids are going to, there's no way that Generation Alpha is not going to be just completely their lives. They're predicted to be, as one interesting stat, 65% of Generation Alpha children will favor an artificial intelligence assistant over a dog. Just let that sit there for a minute, right? This is the world that we're looking at. And so what we can do now is we can help facilitate the most sort of healthy and productive ways for that to happen. Sally, I'm curious from you, could you speculate on creative ways that we could, for instance, do design with further integration into technology, knowing that that's the way it's going anyway?
The thing is that you can actually develop things and get the machinery to then start making your prototypes. Or you can part make a prototype yourself. I mean, one of the first things that when I moved into a new school, one of the first things I made sure we got was a vinyl cutter, because the quality of pupils' work hugely improved. Because I would recommend they paint the work in one color, and then all the decoration went on, any kind of embellishments was cut out of different colored vinyl, and then they stuck that on, and they made products that were as professional as a professional designer. The quality, and seeing when somebody achieves that kind of level of finish is amazing, that level of achievement, and to be honest, it's getting even more and more. I mean, I would never stop hand building things because I think those skills are still really important. We still have hand built furniture. I think, as I say, it is about learning using different machinery as well as the IT. And it's how we take that on and develop that on. I mean, I'm now an artist. I left teaching 3 years ago, but I paint, but then I have things scanned and develop things with technology. I can't help myself, and it's as a designer now, the world is your oyster. I can have pretty much anything manufactured.
Right.
I can literally get my design, send it digitally, and have something made. And I do. Yeah. And I think that's something that's what the kids need to learn. They need to learn, well, what can be done in the world? The fact that I could design a chair and have it delivered in 3 weeks. Yeah,
totally.
And it's those kind of opportunities we need to show the creatives that's what they can do.
Mm-hmm. I think that I too have what I might call a sentimentality toward things like drafting skills, right? Yeah. I went through and watched all of these, the Imagineering story on Disney Plus. Anyone see that?
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen it, see it. It's amazing. One of the things that was so potent for me is in every episode, these are extremely creative people. They're required to make dreams into physical things. They really are. Walt Disney and then Bob Iger and then all the other people in charge would come along and say, this is what we need, figure out how to do it. And this team called the Imagineering team would have to do it. And it always came back to drafting skills at a level that just makes me go, God, like that's, these artists who can just sit down and render. And I'm sentimental toward that. I'm sentimental toward the woodworker, especially who can do what's that style where they joinery, right? Where it's all just tight fit seams. There's no screws and glues, for Pete's sakes. However, there's a potential reality where we won't even need that stuff anymore. I'm not saying I'm for that. What I'm saying is let's examine where our biases come from so we can better kind of move into the future. Debbie, you work with kids K through 5 or K through 6?
First through 5th, yes.
First through 5th. So you work with kids first through 5th. So you're really seeing every single year, you're seeing what I would think of as the beginnings of potential, right? How important is it to preserve these things that they have intrinsic value, like drafting skills, let's say woodworking skills, these hands-on skills? How important is it to preserve them in a world where they're not going to be essential anymore? They're going to be maybe preferred.
Well, I think going back to what Thomas said, there is a need for the basics, right? Hammering and a nail. We have like centers like that out on the playground so they can really do that hands-on learning because that makes it very sticky. But when we look at technology, I believe like anything else, there's a level of responsibility that equals the level of freedom. And if we can keep that together and sort of aligned, then we can allow our students to explore the new technology as long as they're using it responsibly. And I think that's the key. And I think that's where some of the fear comes from, is that these students will not use it responsibly and that they will stop all of their social interaction and they will become that, thing with all the things stuck in. That's not going to happen. But I think we need to be able to embrace the future. Otherwise, we do our children a huge disservice. And how to do that is to model it in a way that allows us to use it so that they see that there is value in both, right? So I think children have no fear on technology. Right. Me, not so much with a crash computer right now. So, but they have the ability to get in. I think it's important that before they leave my school, that they have an understanding of the basics, that they can keyboard, that they can set up an Excel document, that they can do a PowerPoint or a Prezi. There's some basics that they're going to need before they move on to the next level. We also, as they get into upper elementary, introduce different facets. We have smart boards on campus that allow us to bring things to our students in a way that brings them to life that a textbook just couldn't do. So there is some advantages when you are familiar with what you're using, and Thomas had a really good point with that. Otherwise, it is just an expensive piece of equipment that hangs on the wall. And I think it's important to continue to expose them to opportunities and giving my teachers time to not only take classes on this, but to spend time to explore themselves so they can then bring into the classroom different ways to use technology is important to me. And I think it's important to my parents also.
I feel like that asking you to answer that question was like saying to Bruce Lee, just give me one little kick to show me what you got. That was a good answer. I mean, what I take from that we can sort of make universal is we've really got to stay in that place of reason and critical thinking about this, right? We've really got to know our own biases, and we've really got to remember that, like, the kids that come to your school, they don't have as much in common situationally as with us as we may think. Right? They're in such a different world than us, even though we're occupying the same physical space.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's really kind of maybe possibly we'll come away from this conversation with that being the overarching message. It's we have to thread a needle. We got to find a balance between what our best guess is at what's valuable and important, and letting them have this world that is really of the future in many ways.
Mhm.
So Jackie, how do we do that? How do we balance those things?
I'm with the rest of the panel in as far as I don't think introducing it too early is the way forward to get a balance. Because when you do introduce it to high schoolers, they go crazy with it.
Mm-hmm.
There's an argument for getting it normalized, desensitized by introducing it from maybe year 6 onwards.
Mm-hmm.
And saying, not necessarily saying that you should become reliant upon this, okay? Because it should just be used gradually as a tool.
Yeah.
You know, so maybe as a research tool to give you ideas, but it's a matter of integrating it into lessons. So not basing a whole lesson on finding something out online, because that causes a problem with the learning right there.
Yeah.
Because you'd be hard pushed to find a high school class that happily does that and produces the results at the end. You'll spend the whole lesson going, don't go on that, don't go on that, don't do that, turn off YouTube, you know, and then you start again.
I would be inclined to agree with all that. At the same time, I'd want to bring up that there are studies now that show that these so-called generation alpha kids, their brains are going to engage with technology differently.
I agree with you. Their brains do engage with technology, but it's the level of exposure to technology that affects their actual skills, right? Yeah. They're going to live in a world in which technology is a big thing, mm-hmm. and the skills possibly come second, you know, manual skills.
Manual skills.
Yeah, so technology skills come first, manual skills come a close second.
Yeah.
Okay, but technology has that pull, doesn't it? Because it gets things done quicker.
Yeah.
So do you lose a little bit of quality? Possibly. Because you're going to put less thought in it if you press a button and you get your answer than if you had to think about what you're doing and then get an answer.
Right.
Okay. So this is why the skills that Debbie provides from 1 to 5, that foundation is so important to the overall adoption of technology.
Yeah.
Because that foundation is what provides the kids with that ability to think critically about what they're seeing.
Yeah.
All right. With that taken into account, the proper provision of a proper foundation and a gradual integration within the classroom, there'd be less need for teachers and the school system to be as controlling as they possibly are.
Yeah.
You know, because at the moment it's like you try and control the kids' exposure in the classroom to make sure that they don't do the wrong thing. Some of them might not. Some of them. Having taught high school that long, I say some of them.
Right, of course. So playing devil's advocate here a little bit, in a world 10 years in the future or whatever, where we can get virtually indistinguishable 3D printing done of anything, which, I mean, that's coming. If it's not here now, it's coming, right?
Yeah.
If this ain't the mess, it'll do till the mess gets here.
but even then, Manny, it's like working to a brief, okay?
Right.
In the future, even though you can get things done quickly, I would hope that they have that foundation that allows them to think about whether the thing that they're producing quickly is actually the right thing and solves a problem.
Yeah.
Rather than the thing that they can pull off quickly is beautiful, right?
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the fundamental sort of apprehension and sort of uncomfortableness that we have as adults with what's happening, you know, with where we think the kids are going with technology.
Absolutely, but I'm a big fan of as soon as it is appropriate.
Yeah.
Okay, because within there's a mindset that has to be created, that has to do a certain amount of thinking before things can be programmed. You know, computers aren't just programmed, they have to be thought about. So I am a big fan.
Tom, in your best guess, what do you think are the non-negotiable, we'll say, for lack of a better phrase, we'll say mental skills that no matter what the future looks like technologically, that humans going into that future must possess?
Yeah, critical thinking is such a generic term, but it's understanding how outcomes are arrived at. Not necessarily this plus this is 2, but why is that 2?
Right.
And let me see if I can't give you an example. I was traveling a couple of years ago, staying in a hotel that lost its power. I had not been behind the front desk in probably 25 years. Front desk staff didn't know what to do. So I went behind the front desk, and I would have been retired, and I ran their operation for a couple hours because I was the only one that knew how to do it manually.
Right.
So the concern I have is they knew how to check someone into a hotel room, check someone out of a hotel room using a computer. But they didn't understand the concepts of what made all of that work and how doing this impacted this over here without having the computer tell them. Yeah. So that's where my concern is.
Yeah.
You look at Gilligan's Island. It was ultimately a raft that got them off that Gilligan and Skipper made, and all the technology wizardry that the professor had was useless.
Yeah.
So if I go to Survivor, who do I want? Someone who knows how to build a raft, or Mark Zuckerberg? Well, you know what? He's not making a computer out of coconuts. So give me someone who knows how to actually navigate a boat and how to build one versus just how to, set the sextant up.
I would point out to you the professor managed to build a computer out of coconuts.
Well, he did, but they still got stuck on the island. I mean, it really who cares?
Yeah.
But it's learning how things happen and why they happen, and not necessarily just appreciating the end result.
Yeah. Yeah. We can call that moving forward. We can call that the Gilligan's Island hypothesis.
There you go.
I think that really, though, you get at something central with that, right? And I do actually think that calling it something as cheeky as the Gilligan's Island hypothesis does focus us in the right place. It's not as good to just be able to operate in this level, this sphere, this dimension of, as long as the computers are cooperating, everything's fine. There probably wants to be at least one level deeper of self-sufficiency and the critical thinking. So, Sally, let's get your take on, hopefully from a design perspective, on the importance of critical thinking. And can it be mitigated by AI or by, technology or computers?
To be honest, the way I taught, I took kids from year 7. I basically was training them and developing their skills as we went on, and they didn't do their folio work using computers until year 9, so 13. So it was a case of they were gradually doing that. They did the paper skills first.
Yeah.
So I would initially give them design briefs and specifications. They would learn what they were. And gradually, as they went through, they would then develop their own design briefs, their own specifications.
Yeah.
So it's a gradual thing. And basically, the IT was a tool later to enhance what they were doing. So they would learn, the critical thinking would be developed as they went through the years. And also the independence. One of the things that I was really keen on was for them to become independent pupils, so that they would have their own planning. They could go in the room. And I felt I'd achieved my job as a teacher if they didn't need me.
Sure.
That would be the most important thing, because they could actually get on. And sometimes I'd sit there and look around and think, what do I do? I mean, I didn't, because I could always find something to do, but they would be getting on and I'd just monitor, you know, and I tried to turn my room into a design studio. So to try and treat them as designers, you know, and it was a gradual development of them as people as well.
Yeah.
You know, and in a way I was, one of the reasons I left education was because I actually didn't feel as if I fitted the mold at the time. I mean, I was in a private school where, to be honest, the kids were spoon-fed information. And actually them being able to just work off on their own and me not needing to interfere, it seemed to be the wrong thing somehow.
Interesting.
It you know, as my career developed, it just sort of felt as if I should have, you know, apparently my job was to interact with them constantly. And not
for no other
actually
reason
let them
than just to do it.
Yeah, and not let them develop their own skills and just get on and actually discover things themselves as well. We weren't allowed to let them fail. That was a big no-no. And I think you've got to, as a designer, you know, when you look at the great designers, they failed 2,300 times before they came to the right product. You develop, you learn through doing that. Well,
the light bulb comes to mind as an example.
The culture, it just, it was wrong in that way. You know, sometimes they've got to, I mean, when you have to put everything on the board before you start of what they're going to learn in the lesson, I refused to do that because I wanted to surprise them, because sometimes they discover things in the lessons and it's a surprise, and that's how they learn even more, because it's like, oh, I didn't know that.
So,
sorry, I think I went off task then.
Shame on you. The very idea. Education, the word education derives from the word educe, which means to draw out from, to draw out of. Modern education seems to be much more about forcing in. And I think you just spoke to that quite clearly. Even if you might have gone off topic, you wound up in some fertile soil there. So Debbie, can we somehow get this idea back of drawing out of the students, the kids, these people who are going through this process of becoming the citizens of the world that, you know, of tomorrow? And obviously I love saying the world of tomorrow. I think that's pretty clear. How do we, so we've got the one challenge, right? Which is, how do we integrate with technology? What do we do here? And on top of that, there's another layer, which is, can we shift this whole model back around to where we're drawing out? And can we use technology to help us do that? What do you think?
I think we can. And I'm just going to back up a little bit. So when we think about technology, it's no different than going from horse and carriage to a vehicle, right? There's always something new. Right. So I think to be afraid of the new is silly. We're always progressing, and that's really a good thing. Now, we have cars. We could have our 4-year-olds driving cars. There's a reason why we don't, because they're not independent. They're not responsible. They can't reach the pedals. It's kind of the same with technology, right? We got to put them on their training wheels first and bring them up through the system so that they can be responsible, therefore have the freedom to use those tools. And I think that even, you know, an apprentice in a carpentry shop doesn't go in without the carpenter there first and showing them how to use the different tools and demonstrating that they have an understanding before they're allowed to do it on their own. And I think that even with that, a provocative question can allow us to pull from a student their ideas, and asking always the question why. You know, even with technology, why are we allowing them to use this type of technology, or why not? And I think if we can remember to ask why, we can keep our children curious and not, again, put them so they're like zombies simply being fed the next piece of information to simply regurgitate, to forget, to start it all over again, which we've talked about in other shows. I think that there is absolutely a way to ensure that this happens, and it's about making them a part of the culture initially. And we do, I think, a really good job of that because it's something we put on the forefront and really have committed to a culture that is very inclusive. So our students have a lot of ability to speak what they want. I had a tour this morning with a young man who is going to be attending our school in the fall, hopefully, if we're allowed to go back to school. And when I shared with him some of the things that we do, his eyes just kept getting bigger and bigger. And finally I said, Grayson, what are you thinking? I just keep seeing your face getting excited. He goes, I never have had the opportunity to like to be the boss of myself.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, here you're going to be the boss, because that's really important to me, that you have the ability to determine what it is and why you're here. And, I use the same line every educator has used. I already have all my degrees. This time it's your turn. And so you need to do this for you, not for me. But you can't demand that. You have to release that, right? They have to feel it. It's a feeling. It's not a permission. And I don't think we do a very good job in most cases of allowing a child to feel that. So therefore, there's no incentive to take the initiative. Whereas if we can turn that around and you can lay that foundation early and set that culture up, they will rise to the occasion, because I've watched it repeatedly over and over and over in middle, high school, and now my elementary students. And so it's simply a different mindset. And once that mindset sets in, then they never disappoint. They just don't.
Outstanding. To the group, on balance, are you optimistic about the trajectory of education, the possibilities, the inclusion of technology and all of that stuff? Are you optimistic about where things will wind up in 10 to 20 years?
Do you mean in the public schools?
God, no. Not in the public schools. No, with the possibilities of what can happen.
The possibilities are endless.
Yes.
In the right hands.
Yeah.
With the right planning. Mm-hmm. This is like, I can't even find the word right now. Yeah. But it is just endless. We could produce little kids with so much skill, so that they make us look, quite happily people who should be sent to the beach and with their feet up.
Which should be the goal, by the way. Yeah.
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 Do you understand?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a case of, like Debbie said, let them be the boss. I've always believed in giving them a voice, letting them say what they would like to see happen, and showing them the way to make it happen, rather than saying to them, this is how I do things, and if you don't do it my way, then you're wrong. Mm-hmm. Right? Once we take that away and introduce more technology, more opportunities for them to explore what is going on in that head, we can just sit back and watch the magic happen.
I think it's an act of assuring our own futures as well.
Absolutely.
Let me just go on record for anyone who has any doubt at all. My belief is public school is a decaying artifice. Tom, what do you think? Are you optimistic about the possibilities?
I am, with a pessimistic tint, if you will.
That's why we keep bringing you back, by the way.
I think that the private schools have an endless and boundless opportunity to enrich children.
Yeah.
And that's going to be outstanding for those children that can get into and afford being in a private school.
Right.
Which leaves a decaying and very flawed public school system to pick up a lot of pieces that they're going to be ill-equipped to pick up with.
So already ill-equipped.
So my concern is that those who can afford the adventures of and the benefits of private school are going to excel, like a generation of people we've never seen.
Yeah.
But the kids that are forced to continue to attend failing schools that are only going to continue to fail and probably get worse as more of the better teachers migrate towards the private school sector. I see a generation of kids or 2 generations of kids potentially lost, and almost a Panam type of thing, going back to a Hunger Games analogy, that they're going to be the rich are going to have everything, and then you're going to have the coal miners. And then that chasm is only going to grow. And that is my concern. And I am not as quick to give up on the public school system as others.
Sure.
And that's having spent 18 years as a student and then another 18 years as a parent, very involved in the school system. It's got a lot more potential if we can get more people with enthusiasm and passion about education to fill out the Board of Education roles and to drive the public system. Because I think unquestionably the private sector is going to be fine. You go to a private school, you're going to grow, you're going to flourish. But that's not going to accommodate 100% of the students. And my concern is the 40% of the kids that just can't get into, for whatever reason, a private school. What happens to them? And I think the has and have not, that gap is just going to grow to the point where it could be crippling to not only the economy, but to the country as a whole. And honestly, if you go even more globally, then that's a concern. And that is a concern about it.
It is I think, a fair and valid concern. I really do. What would you say to the notion of private school quality education free for all, with a plan that, so it's obviously all about funding, right?
Right.
It's all about the money. It's like Jerry Maguire, show me the money. What if we could succeed in drawing the funding from other sources, alumni, partnerships with whole industry sectors?
The money is there. The difference between a private school education and a public school education is roughly $1,500 as an average across the country. The money exists. The money is absolutely there.
That's right.
And you can take a look at, say, Harvard, for example, who has, $45 billion in reserves. That at any point they could give 3 generations of kids free education if they so desired.
Right.
So there is money out there for education.
Yeah.
It's having the people in place that are going to have the stones to allocate it properly and then to continue to look for new revenue streams, like the corporate partnerships we talked about in previous week. Yeah. So the money, honestly, is the least of the concerns. My concern, the greatest concern and the obstacle is the mindset of those currently in charge. And then what's it going to take to change the mindset? Because the money is inconsequential because there's plenty of it.
That's right.
There's plenty of money. So that to me is not really part of the discussion. It's what do we need to do to change the mindset of the people that control the purse strings?
I think that's a really good point, Tom, because I think that the perception is that it's a money question. Not your perception, obviously, but the general perception is that it's a haves and have-nots money question. And it is, I couldn't agree with you more.
At the individual family level, my parents could not afford to send 5 kids to private school K through 12. It wasn't going to happen.
Right.
It wasn't going to happen. But if we decided education was going to be a value and we were going to take all the educational funds that were available and all other available money, everyone could have gotten a private education or a much better public education.
Right.
But again, part of the problem with the public education system is a hierarchy. Do you really need to have 1.5 administrators for every single student or whatever the ratios are so out of whack?
Right.
So that's great for employment, but it's not a practical use, any good use of spending money. So you need someone that's got the guts to take, frankly, a wrecking ball to the whole system and rebuild it intelligently.
Well, if you're going to rebuild that system at all, then you're speaking my language when you say wrecking ball.
Well, absolutely. It's got to be a wrecking ball.
Yeah.
It absolutely has to be a wrecking ball.
Yeah. Sarah, in your estimation, is the is public education too far gone to be saved, or can you envision a way that it can be sort of resurrected and restructured to serve the kind of things we're talking about here today?
Manny, you did say Sarah.
Sally. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Sally. I thought you were frozen there. You were so still. Thank you, Jackie.
I mean, my thoughts are that the curriculum needs completely rewriting. Personally, I would look at the way I would look at education is look at what skills children need by the end of each section of education and work backwards. Look at what skills, what basic skills, and obviously you're going to have different abilities, but look at the skills they need. So that when a child, for instance, comes up to me, because I was teaching in secondary, I'd like them to be able to measure in millimeters. And, it's those basic skills. That's, also, I think looking at the mental health and putting mental health as part of the core of education.
Yeah.
I have seen far too many kids actually have mental breakdowns. Not personally in my classes, but I have seen kids because of the pressure.
Yeah.
Because and these are some really able kids who put extra pressure on themselves.
Right.
And we need to look at mental health. We need, there are core things that we need to have a look at.
So
and that independent learners. And actually, we need to get kids to have a love of education, actually enjoy being taught, and that motivation, and not turn kids off because we're trying to teach them stuff that actually is so dry that, some of the things in the UK system, I would have, as a dyslexic, I would have had a nightmare because you've got to rely on memory. And that is one big thing that, I am hopeless at, absolutely hopeless.
Yeah.
If I've got to learn something, it takes me a hell of a lot. I don't think we have enough consolidation of learning.
Well, so I asked the question again. Do you think it's something that can happen within the public school?
Yeah, I think it could.
Uh-huh.
I think it could, but the problem is we've effectively, in the UK, got politicians who pretty much decide.
I think that's the same thing here. Yeah.
None of which are qualified teachers, remember that.
Right.
Well, the thing is that because everybody went to school, they all think they know what should happen in a school. But they haven't got a clue until you... No, it's true, doesn't it? It's same with parents.
Yeah.
Until you actually... I mean, I'd been in industry for a few years before I went back into education. And until you've actually been in there, you don't realise what it's like. Until you've been in a classroom. And I would say... I heard one of the previous programs where you mentioned the way teachers are taught to teach, the way we have to. I mean, I was lucky in that I did a scheme where I was based in a school and just went on day release to college. So I actually almost had 2 years experience and literally walked my first job interview. I walked straight into the job.
Yeah.
Because all the others had been college based. And I think, but even then I would say it was another 4 or 5 years before I could honestly say I'd cracked it. I mean, I personally think teaching should almost be an apprenticeship.
I think it should be an apprenticeship. I think it should be a status job. I think it should be a profession of immense respect, high pay, immense expectation. I think the entire way that teaching is created, perceived, treated speaks directly to the quality of the public school experience for kids. I couldn't agree more. It's completely, it's not even cart before the horse. It's carts over here and horses over there behind the haystack. They're not even connected anymore. It's ridiculous. We need to wrap up. We're coming to time. So Well, I think I'll just sign us off because we're so close to the hour. Not Sarah, but Sally Brown. Thank you so much for helping us out today and joining us. Tom, it's a pleasure every time, my friend.
The pleasure's all mine.
I like how you laugh as though you think maybe I'm being sarcastic.
Oh, that's the world I live in. Well, I figured you invited me so you didn't have to read all my comments.
Right. Let's just get him on. Just have him say it in person. And as usual, Jackie and Debbie, thank you guys so much. This has been volume 7, you guys, of the Future of Education Roundtable. Next week marks 2 months, volume 8. That is so cool. I love it. Thank you, whoever is watching, whoever tunes in. Thank you so much for giving us your eyeballs, your attention, your focus. And if you've seen more than one episode, you must be interested. Reach out with any questions you have. If you'd like to find out how to get involved or maybe be a guest, reach out to myself and let me know. And with that, we sign off for this week.